Welcome to Voices of Impact, a show where dreams meet action and change makers unite. We are your co-hosts, Brad and Kathy Lambert of KBL Impact Partners. You can find us locally in your city on My Genre Radio FM, Monday through Fridays at 2 p.m. Central, and Urban Core Television at 3 p.m. Central. You can find all 100 plus stations on A2 Media under radio and television tabs.
We are so excited to be with you today. Our guest is Rhonda Gray. Rhonda has dedicated her 30-plus year career to expanding human potential through education, workforce, and community development. Her early career experiences as a health educator, therapist, and trainer in low-income communities inspired her to end social and economic injustice. She began working at the United Way of Greater St. Louis to support nonprofit agencies in achieving better outcomes to advance their missions. Following that, Rhonda became the executive director of Almost Home, working with the homeless, pregnant, and the parenting of young women. After leaving Almost Home, Rhonda transitioned to roles in the for-profit sector as a consultant, advisor, and business development director. She strongly believes that government, businesses, and nonprofits must effectively collaborate and be the forces for good to address some of our biggest social problems. A native of St. Louis, Rhonda obtained her bachelor's degree in English and business from Alabama A&M University, along with a master's degree in counseling from the University of Missouri St. Louis. Rhonda is also a certified facilitator for the Entrepreneur Learning Institute and TCC Group's Core Capacity Assessment Tool. She completed the Crucial Influence for Leaders training and won the Dale Carnegie Leadership Award. She has volunteered as a mentor to youth and volunteers on several nonprofit boards. When we come back, we'll be joined by Rhonda Gray.
Rhonda, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
It's so exciting.
I'm excited. I'm super excited.
So, you have 30 plus years experience as and I like this term, relentless agent of change in the nonprofit sector. Tell us a little about you and your background and what inspired you to dedicate your career to this important work.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. That relentless agent for change is the politically correct way of saying troublemaker.
I love it.
But good trouble. I've been making good trouble.
Right.
I think probably since I know at least a teenager. I got very much involved in the community and civic engagement in high school. And so as I started thinking about my career choices, I've worked in nonprofit and for-profit, but I always wanted to do work that I felt like was purpose-driven and a force for good. Right. And so now having worked in different sectors, I see myself sort of as the bridge to bring all these sectors together to figure out how we can tackle some of our most serious social issues.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Capacity building is a big buzzword in the nonprofit sector, and it's also a major challenge for nonprofits. Yeah. What are some key components to an effective capacity building strategy in your view?
Well, capacity building, I think it's often misunderstood. Capacity is, people oftentimes think of it like this balloon, like how far can I stretch before I pop, which is why you see a lot of executive directors, nonprofit leaders, they literally are functioning like that. And so you're prone to burnout and, mission creeping and going out of your scope of work. But capacity is really about infrastructure. It's about creating, to me, a solid foundation built around like your leadership and your management, and your technical capacity, and then more importantly, especially now, your adaptive capacity.
Yeah.
Do you have the infrastructure in place so that you can be agile and be responsive, not necessarily reactive, just responsive to what's happening in the environment around you, because you can't keep that static. I don't care how much planning you do.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think responsive is the key word there.
Responsive is the
Yeah.
key word.
And I think the adaptability, right? The agility
Mm-hmm.
and being able to adapt, especially now during everything what's happening. And so how do you engage then, like your board, how do you engage your team in this process?
Yeah. One of the things that is, I think, overlooked with capacity building in particular is we speak of it in terms of organizational capacity. Organizational capacity is only as effective to the extent that you build individual capacity. So for nonprofits,
That's a really good
the
point.
individual capacity of your board members, the individual capacity of your staff and your team members and your volunteers. I mean, if you have people who don't have the capacity in terms of like the skill set, the understanding, the commitment to the mission of the work, you can build an infrastructure and systems and processes around people who are not as invested or people who are not as skilled, and you're still going to have the same issues. And so one of the things I think that nonprofits need to look at, what does our individual capacity look like, so that you kind of simultaneously work on both the organization at the organizational level, but also make sure you're investing at the individual level.
So I think that, that all sounds great, right? And I'm just thinking about our audience, and some of them that may be smaller organizations,
Right.
and overwhelmed with, okay, so how do I go about doing this? What are those steps to take, and then how am I going to pay for it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know what it is? The overwhelmed, I'm glad you said that. One of the things I've seen nonprofits, and even for-profits for this matter, they resist against is the dirty F word. Focus. Focus. One of the reasons why people, particularly if you're a startup, you're overzealous, you're passionate, you're idealistic, and you want to change the world and do everything. You cannot. You have got to pick an area first where you can sort of penetrate that area of your mission. I mean, you might have a big, noble mission that you envision,
right,
but you have to start somewhere. And one of the reasons I think people immediately get overwhelmed, whether they're an established organization or even in a startup, is they're trying to be all things to all people.
Right.
So,
right,
in terms of, if I had to be, prescriptive about it, I would say, look at what you're doing and decide, prioritize, and do almost a hierarchy. What is the lead domino? What is the thing that if you make that impact, it's going to give you the most bang for your buck that enables you to do some of that other work? So first of all, really focus, and it becomes a process of elimination much more than being additive.
right. So can you give an example of, just an example of that process? You as an executive director. And so what does that look like?
Oh yeah, I had to do it. I think this is where I honed my skills in doing it. When I was executive director of a transitional housing program, the program was for homeless, pregnant, and parenting young women. And so it's called Almost Home. And so the understanding was, this is to house young women. Well, what I knew was that this program couldn't be just about housing young women, because that's a nice output. But then what's the next step for them? How do you get them out of the cycle of homelessness? And so we had all kinds of ideas about implementing an education program where we would help them get their high school diplomas and GEDs, and then a workforce training program,
right,
and then they had kids, so we needed a daycare. And so, we had all these ideas based around the needs of these young women.
And that's overwhelming. Right?
Overwhelming. And so at first we were like, okay, we're going to do it all. We were trying to get a daycare on site. We put in a computer lab to have, and then it occurred to me, there are agencies that are already doing this. this.
Yes.
You have to collaborate. You have to find the best strategic partnerships. So we collaborated, we formed not even collaboration, a strategic partnership with another nonprofit that had a daycare center up the street. We worked
Love
with St. Louis
this.
Public Schools, and so they did the education piece, but we really had to pull the right partners in so that we could address their needs in a more comprehensive way, but that we weren't doing it all. So I had to say, no, me and the team, what is it that we can do well? You know, and where is it that we need to bring other people in to supplement and augment the work that we do so that it
Right.
works?
Brilliant.
Yes,
Right?
Yeah.
I love
We're
that.
gonna
It's
get into
easier said than
partnerships.
done.
We're going to
Easier
get
said
into
than done.
partnerships a little bit more after the break, but you're right. Too many times we think, well, here's a gap in service. I'll
Yeah.
just fill it myself.
I'll feel it myself.
And, you know, you can't do it all.
No.
You can't do it all.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's where those partnerships and collaborations become so important.
Yeah.
And thinking about that, so if you wouldn't have done that, and I'm just thinking about too of all the different nonprofits, right, that are out there, then what happens if you would just continue to try to do it all?
Oh, you first of all, you make yourself susceptible to mission creeping really fast, but also you're.
Can you explain that? What is mission creep?
Mission creep. I don't think enough people realize this because they think their mission means, well, we want to do a particular thing. So for us, it was to, establish housing and support services for homeless, pregnant, and parenting teens. Well, those support services is pretty broad, right? So every time somebody we'd even have funders who would propose we do stuff, and we'd be like, oh, that's kind of a support service. But we'd be like, wait a minute, we're kind of going out of our lane here to do that. And so mission creeping is when you start providing services that extend beyond the scope of what it is that you're capable of doing, given the limited resources and constraints that you have to execute that mission.
That's a good definition.
Yeah.
That's a great definition.
Yeah. And it's really about staying within your resources and capabilities.
Absolutely.
Finding partners to do the rest.
And you actually get more, you can be more impactful. I always say you have to contract to expand.
I like that.
And when you are focused, when you get more specialized in your approach around the work that you do, you actually are more impactful than when you try to be all things to people.
Okay, we are going to pause now for a short break. This is Voices of Impact, and we will be right back. Okay, Rhonda, 1 down, 3 to
That's
go.
good.
We're off and rolling.
I love it. Hey, nonprofit leaders. Brad and I know that your time is valuable, and so is the work that you do. That's why we've created mini courses for nonprofit organizations that get straight to the point.
That's right. Each of our mini courses takes 30 minutes or less and dives into topics like building your budget, creating a fund development plan, writing successful grant applications, and having meaningful donor conversations. Perfect for busy leaders who want real results fast.
So head over to kblimpactpartners.com to learn more.
Start making a bigger impact and raising more money today. Welcome back to Voices of Impact and our special guest, Rhonda Gray.
Oh, thank you.
Rhonda, we all talk about, and we were just talking about it before the break, the value of partnerships and collaborations. I think it's safe to say easier said than done. So what are some critical factors to finding that right partner? I mean, what do you look for in an ideal partner?
That's a great question. And let me first say, let's make the distinction between There's cooperation, there's collaboration, and then there's partnerships.
Okay.
I love that. There's cooperation.
There are tiers to it, and all
Collaboration and
are
partnership.
great. But cooperation looks like, you know, when you all were leading your agency, and one of the things we first did, which I think was very much like cooperation and collaboration, is I said, listen, these girls need the professional
Right.
skills class you have.
Right.
We don't want to do it here. Can we send them there?
Right.
Right.
Like a referral.
Like a
Right,
referral
a
base.
referral
It was
basis.
reciprocal.
Right.
Partnerships, particularly when they're more strategic, is when you really are thoughtful about where your gaps in services are.
Right.
And you identify people who have been successful or are being successful at addressing those gaps that you have, because what you want to do with a strategic collaboration is almost create a continuum of services. So there's gaps here. We need to take the client from here to here. And so if there are gaps in what you're providing, you look intentionally for people who can fill that gap.
Right.
But then you vet those people, because you don't want them to start doing mission creep and going out of scope. So you really have a conversation about whether or not they have the capacity,
Right.
whether they have the infrastructure, because they can do it, they may not have the staffing to do it.
Right.
They may not have, because anytime you do a partnership, it does require some work, because you need to be communicating, you need to be working together. I will say, if you really want to do it well, you want to share data and figure out ways where you can exchange the data, so you can see whether or not you are having the collective impact
Right.
between both your organizations.
And I think that's really key, Rhonda, especially when you said that collective impact, right? And when you get to start to share data, people tend to
Get territory,
want to keep
yeah.
it to themselves.
Yes.
And so to me, that's also a mindset.
It's very much a mindset. And you have to look at it from a very evaluative sort of mindset and
Right.
approach. Because if I'm partnering with you all and you're doing your piece and I'm doing my piece, we want to really try to distill, like, if we see change,
Yes.
what is contributing most to the change? Do we attribute the change to what we've done collectively, or does it look like that change is happening more from what you're contributing?
Right.
And I think people are not looking at partnerships in a strategic way, so that they're collecting the data, sharing data, analyzing the data, evaluating
Right.
their process together. Yeah.
Right.
And sharing responsibility.
And sharing
Yes, there you go.
responsibility,
Sharing
so that
control,
absolutely.
And
which is
being-
hard for a lot of
Right.
organizations.
And I think it's
Oh,
also,
yeah.
too, of being very clear of who's doing what.
And who's doing what?
Right, and having a memorandum of understanding, and really knowing that this is what each are bringing to the table.
I think a good partnership, you almost outline it in the same way. It doesn't need to be as robust, for instance, as a strategic plan, but I will certainly say, I like the idea of what I
yeah.
call a strategic canvas. It's a one-page canvas that I look at with agencies to kind of as a roadmap, a blueprint, and you can do it around partnerships, you can do it around a specific just program, new initiative you want to pilot.
Right.
But it's a way of keeping you focused on all the different areas that you need to keep your eye on and see if what you're doing is successment.
Right, because
Yeah.
that's really key. At the end of the day, you want to be able to move that needle.
You absolutely
Right.
have to be moving the needle. And I'm one of, I don't think in the past nonprofits have thought about that as much, because they think, well, we're doing good work, we're helping. Well, it's about outcomes and results. At the end of the day, you have to perform. It's about performance.
You gotta have
Absol-
impact.
Gotta have
Absolutely.
impact.
So what role does your board play, or does your board play a role in that?
Boards can be tricky for some, particularly for some leaders, because on the one hand, you have that competing interest of, we need to raise money,
Right.
But you got your daily operations, and then you got to keep your eye on making sure you have impact. Well, you certainly want board members to be diverse enough where you have board members that give you access to resources and to other organizations and people who can help you. But I think what's more important is you select board members that really, first of all, have a passion for the work you do, have bought into, and have a good understanding. Because board members get on boards for different reasons.
Right,
So you want to interview for sort of their motivation,
right,
for getting on the board. But I think clearly defining the role of the board. You can't underestimate the importance of board education and onboarding. I've been on a lot of boards, and it's amazing to me sometimes where people invite people to be on a board because they're so excited to have a particular person. And it's like, you have not on board, you've told that person nothing. They have no context for the work you're doing. Yeah. You throw financials in front of them, but you didn't tell them that,
there's not a job description.
It's not a job description. It's just like, I said, treat board members like a new employee, like a new role. You have got to make sure that they have the information they need, because they are supposed to, in their role, be making informed decisions in some key areas. And I don't think oftentimes that's shared with them. But I think also what's important is create individual relationships with board members so that you understand what it is that what they're looking to gain from being on the board, and also what they're looking to contribute. But then you also have to manage that with having that relationship with the collective board.
That's right.
Because boards don't operate, and I know some board members don't realize this, but they'll say, well, I'm a board member. You are a member of a board, which collectively is supposed to make decisions. One board member cannot dictate what goes on in an organization.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Sorry to tell some of you guys that.
So, fundraising.
Uh-oh.
It's a necessity.
Oh, that's another F word.
And a struggle.
I tell you.
For many nonprofits.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to leaders to kind of help them with finding the right fundraising strategy or strategies to raise money?
Yeah. I have probably a slightly different point of view about fundraising. And let me just say this. I think that when we look at, because I look at human motivation and human psychology, I'm a big sort of behavioral person, like why we do what we do. And people donate money for the same reasons that they, depart with their money in other ways, the same reason they buy stuff.
It's very personal,
It's very personal.
Right.
It's personal. It has to do with them perceiving value in what they're exchanging their money for. I always say money only exchanges hands when value is perceived or problems are being solved. I think in terms of fundraising, one of the things nonprofits are not, many of them don't do enough of is really selling that problem and having people have a deeper understanding of what's going on. They think because they get why it's a problem. Even some of what you would consider your, the basic known problems, homelessness, for instance.
Right.
Yeah, you can pull people's heartstrings and be like, oh my God, we got too many people homeless in there. But unless you educate people around the impact of homelessness and the stories of how people, because otherwise people make up stories in their own mind about, oh, they just don't want to work. Oh, this is why, because people want to explain away situations.
They have it in their minds, but
exactly.
They think, right?
I don't care what it is. If you're working with the formerly incarcerated, oh, well, they did a bad thing, so why should we support that? It is incumbent on nonprofits to make sure, first of all, that they're educating. And then the second thing is, once again, your performance-based, that you're showing a return on investment for contributing to your agency. You donating money, yes, you want people to be altruistic and charitable, but what is it that you're going to get, or we're going to get as a community as a result of receiving that funding? So approach fundraising with a ROI, bottom line, performance mindset, and I think that it'll shift the way you start approaching even how you deliver your programs and how you invite funders to partner with you.
Well, and I think what you were just talking about, there's so many nuggets that you just shared.
Yeah.
Then I think that too, that it's really, again, being able to show what is that impact.
What's the impact?
Right? And what is it that, and educating people about the cause and the work that you're doing, which I think is so key for nonprofit leaders, and especially today.
And also discovering funder motivation.
Absolutely.
I read an excellent book. It's called The Seven Faces of Philanthropy or something, and it was a great book. But one of the things, I had donors who would say, "Look, I'm giving because I want the tax credits."
Right. Well, and I want to hear more about that book.
Okay.
Now, I love that. And we are going to pause for just a short break right now. And we are Voices of Impact, and we will be right back with Rhonda Gray. Thank you. Nonprofit leaders, do you want expert insights to grow your impact? Subscribe today to the KBL Impact Partners YouTube channel. You will receive powerful fundraising strategies, leadership tips, and exclusive content from Voices of Impact, the show that spotlights changemakers just like you. Don't miss an episode. Get the tools, inspiration, and the expert advice to raise more and do more for your mission. Subscribe now at youtube.com/@KBL Impact Partners and start transforming your nonprofit today.
Welcome back to Voices of Impact and our special guest today, Rhonda Gray. Rhonda, right before we went to break, you were starting to talk about a book. And we want to open that book up a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about the book?
Yeah, the Seven Phases of Philanthropy. It's by Russ Allen Prince, and it's an older book. I read it many years ago, but it opened my eyes to this notion of donor motivations and really understanding when you're talking to someone about supporting your organization, to look at it from their vantage point.
Right.
So one of the reasons, for instance, people may give is because they have a personal connection. A good example of that is college alumni. I give to my college because I went there.
Right.
I mean, I don't keep up with what's going on at the college necessarily in terms of the day-to-day operations and I know they're educating students. I give because I'm an alumni. Then you have organizations like, for instance, St. Jude. If you've had, or the American Heart Association, you may have had a family member that dealt with that particular issue. That's why you're drawn to it.
Right.
It's not just because you think it's an important cause. The agency, the person, the donor themselves may have had an experience. If you're not asking the right questions and having a conversation with donors to find out what their reasons and motivations are for giving.
Right.
You have people who, I had donors and I loved it because they were upfront. They were purely like, listen, I just want tax credits. You guys offer tax credits? I need some state tax breaks. They did. When they said, stop even sending me the mailings and wasting the postage. I was like, okay.
I just want the tax credit.
I just want the tax credits.
Just write a letter.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, and I love what you just mentioned, though, too, of having that two-way conversation. Because many times I think that we come across almost desperate, right? That we need the money, and we miss developing that relationship and listening for keying into why do they give, what's important to them, and exactly what you said, to really know, finding out what really grabs their hearts.
What really grabs their heart, absolutely. And you can't, empathy, I think for me, I realized, like I said, and having discovered sort of like consumer behavior and consumer psychology back in my business and marketing days, I approached it like, how do I see things from this donor's perspective?
Right.
I want to empathize with them because this is something that's allowing them to tell whatever their story is, fulfill whatever legacy they want to have around their philanthropic goals.
Absolutely.
So who am I to just come in and say, well, you ought to give because it's the right thing to do? That's not necessarily true.
Right. Right.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance of impact and outcomes. I read a statistic, 58% of major donors say they would give more if they knew the impact their donation was having. And it's up to you to demonstrate that you are making a change in whatever this problem is that you're addressing.
Absolutely.
They want to fund your impact, not just your existence.
That's great. Yes, absolutely. No, that's a great one. And I think that people are understanding more, organizations or understanding the importance of needing to have outcomes and needing to have the impact, I think that we've gone so long without that being a requirement that people are now struggling as to, well, how do we do that? And the needs have become so much greater.
Right. Well, and I think too, when thinking of our situation today within our country, right? And many nonprofits are facing, possible significant funding cuts. Many of them have had federal funding. And so what are some things that they should consider and to address some of the shortfalls in their funding?
It goes back to that, they got to make some serious choices, and it goes back to focus. I mean, you simply cannot think you can continue to do what you've been doing with a third of the funding. You have got to make some choices, and once again, it has to be about go back to mission. The mission and your vision of that organization is your bat signal. That is the guiding light. And so you look at you may have been doing some wonderful things. I know organizations that got like upwards to 30 and 40 programs, and they said we need the food pantry, and we need the clothing drive, and we need the backpack program, and we need and if your funding has been cut, you then have to look and say, what do we get the highest leverage from in terms of having the most impact with the clients we're trying to serve that is still in alignment with the mission?
Right.
And so it's almost like this forcing function. When you lose funding or at risk of losing funding, it forces you to sit down and really make some hard choices.
Absolutely. And we know that, Brad.
Oh, sure.
We had experienced that.
I've experienced that,
with the organization that we were at. And we experienced it the hard way. And actually having a federal grant that didn't renew. And what we didn't do is, beforehand, we didn't diversify our funding. And when that happened, it made us think about exactly what you said.
Yeah, you become really vulnerable if your funding isn't diversified.
Well, it needs to be diversified, and what you said too is it really caused us to take a look at what do we do well, and how can we double down on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And who can we partner with?
And look at your organization internally. I will say there's probably a lot of unintentional waste or inefficiency. I won't say waste, inefficiency that goes on with nonprofits because we're reactive.
What do you?
So let me. So we're reactive. So for instance, okay, we need to start, and we're going to start an XYZ program. Oh, okay. Well, now we need a program manager or a case manager to run that program, and then we need a coordinator to do the. So now you're bloated in terms of your overhead and your operations. Part of what you look at with capacity building and assessing your organizational health is how can we get the most leverage? How can we be efficient? Operations can run, nonprofits can run lean, effective operations in the same way that for-profit companies can. But we don't have, I'd love to start the lean nonprofit movement where nonprofits really can look at their infrastructure and operations. I think I am.
I think you are.
I think I am. Because I'm like, well, you have all this staff, you have all this, you're supplanting resources, you're duplicating efforts, and I think looking at that becomes critical before you get in a position of, oh my God, we have funding cuts and now you have to lay off people.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the advantages I think also of nonprofits versus for-profit, nonprofit, you can engage your volunteers.
Absolutely.
And the
That's
more
why I say get more leverage.
And we used to have a saying that, think about how we can work ourselves out of a job.
Absolutely.
And I know that makes some people nervous, but it's just like
people don't like to hear that.
You can engage and volunteer, the more that you can do other things and engage other communities. And it's really powerful, I think, for nonprofits to really take that look.
Right, absolutely. And I think one of the things I did, and I was not criticized for it, but people were like, but I said success in this organization is not a secret, it's a system. Right. And so I worked very hard at creating processes and systems to make things more efficient. And the staff appreciated it a great deal because we were able to help more people and actually get their jobs became less like stressful
Right.
because it's like, okay, we know how all of these interrelated parts work together.
And that's really a key part of capacity building that we were
Yes.
talking about earlier, is having those processes and procedures make you more efficient, make you more nimble,
Yes.
and make you more responsive
Yes.
to opportunities as they come along.
And it's putting that structure in place.
Yeah, but
You know?
it's not easy. But
It's
once
not
you do it
easy.
once, then it's hard. It's a hard lift, a heavy lift. But once you do it, then it makes things so much easier.
Well, and I think when I know we're going to have to take a break in just a second.
Okay.
Because I think that one of the things I would love to unpack a little bit is that how can you have structure and still be adaptable and agile?
Oh, good question. Good
Right?
question. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
as you put that structure together, and especially for a lot of grassroots organizations, and changing and shifting going up that life cycle curve, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And which will be really great. So as we're getting ready we're going to go ahead and take a short break, and we'll be right back with Voices of Impact and with Rhonda Gray.
Welcome back to Voices of Impact, and our guest today is Rhonda Gray.
And Rhonda, right before we took our break, we were talking about that as you're growing as a nonprofit, and especially in our times today too, that you mentioned about putting structure into place, processes, and procedures. So as you're changing from let's say a grassroots organization, and putting that in place, and you're very agile and shifting and changing, how can you still be agile and adaptable? And as you're putting that structure in place?
Well, you have to understand the difference, first of all. So the structure that you want to put in place in systems and processes, that's around your operations and infrastructure piece, right? So you're not trying to be agile in the way you do accounting, like you go to jail, okay? So you want to make sure you have the right accounting systems, the right business processes, your hiring processes. Those are things that can be relatively static in terms of you get the good processes in place. Where you are agile is in your service delivery and how you approach the service delivery and your offerings. That is where you have to sort of bend and be more flexible, because there's more than one way to service your clients and get the results. And oftentimes people have been doing programs in a certain way, and so they don't realize that. I'm a big proponent of don't get so much caught up in a program. If you have an organization where you are creating change, create the process for how you develop people or whatever your change process is, because that's what can be agile. And when you got a program, you feel like you're married to this program itself.
Right. So it sounds like to me that it's putting that structure into place. And you mentioned before about the lean nonprofit.
Yes, absolutely.
To be able to put the structure in place, and helping you to be lean as a nonprofit and entrepreneurial thinking.
Yes.
Right, with your service delivery.
Absolutely. You have to
And
have
being
very
able
much
to partner.
Entrepreneurial thinking. I use a basic example we all understand. McDonald's has an infrastructure that allows them to be, you can go in any McDonald's in the world and pretty much get, the same thing. However, McDonald's also bends with the time. So right now, eggs prices are sky high, right? So you're not gonna get a whole lot of different variations of egg McMuffins or egg sandwiches or whatever. They are going to shift and change their menu, the service delivery, depending on what's going on around them. But that function, the underlying function of how the organization runs, that's not going to change. That stays the same.
That's their secret sauce.
That's the secret sauce, right?
Right.
Good point. So Rhonda, nonprofits tend to focus heavily on fundraising, obviously, but maybe less on marketing. And how does a nonprofit effectively market themselves, and how does marketing and fundraising really marry up and work together?
Oh, I love this question because I love marketing and I learned to love fundraising because I fell in love with marketing. So fundraising and let me just say this, so many people have sort of this aversion to fundraising. Like, I don't want to have to ask for money. I don't want to have to ask for money. And I'm like, the reason you're feeling like that is the same reason like salespeople when they're just trying to sell somebody something without having established trust, without having established a relationship, and through marketing you can do that.
Right.
Marketing is about storytelling. It's about developing that relationship and that trust. It's not just about social media, which is what some nonprofits do. They say, okay, we threw up a Facebook page and we got an Instagram account, but really using marketing, whether it's your website, social media platforms, all of those are places where you can be educating the public about your mission and your work and what you're doing. You could be showcasing those success stories, the performance, so that when you have to do the ask or when you're doing the actual fundraising, which is about developing those relationships and making that ask, marketing has done the heavy lifting for you. You know, they say, you know, in for-profit, I think it was Peter Drucker who said, marketing done well makes sales superfluous. It's the same thing in nonprofit. Marketing done well makes fundraising so much easier because people say, oh my God, I've heard of you all.
That is.
I've heard of you all. I've heard about your cause. I know what you do. I saw that story about so-and-so who was able to do this. Well, now the ask is not an ask. They're asking you to give.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So what do you need? So why are you making marketing, you know, you need to make the marketing drive the fundraising actually.
I love that.
People
Make the marketing drive the fundraising.
Make the marketing drive the fundraising. Do not lead with the fundraising.
Right. Right.
So how do nonprofits balance the competing demands of the agency's impact versus its financial health? It seems like those two can kind of butt heads.
They absolutely butt heads, and they're symbiotic. No money, no mission.
That's it.
No money, no
You're
mission.
You're speaking our language.
Yeah, exactly. And so you got people who go, they lean very heavily on impact and mission at the expense of looking for sustainable, diverse funding, and they find themselves not being able to execute mission. Yeah. So now you can't help anybody.
Right.
Or you have those people who are, I mean, they are like fundraising, you know, zealots, and they're out and they're collecting money on everything, but not keeping their eye on the performance of, you know, the organization and the service delivery and the return on investment.
Right.
They're not furthering the mission. And it really is a balance. So part of this comes back again to capacity building. You want to, first of all, have a team in place so that you have, you know, whether it's people in your programs, the chief of programs, or people who are working on the service and impact portion of what you do, that is happening in a way that you know that you guys are doing the work, it's performing, you get a return on the investment. You also want to have a strong development team led by the executive director, CEO. They're always the chief fundraising officer. So even if you have a development director or somebody, but here's the trick. Those two teams have to be talking.
Right.
Fundraising does not happen in isolation of programs because then you do make it a competition between impact and the funding. How do you bring...
They need to work together.
They need to be working together.
Symbiotically.
See, if you're not having, if a nonprofit ever has a meeting where fundraising meets separate from programs, you're going to be in trouble.
Right.
You're going to be in trouble.
Good point.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So as a nonprofit leader, you've been there, done that.
Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt.
That's right.
I've been hazed.
So let's talk about self-care and burnout. And as a leader yourself and running an organization, what would you say to other nonprofit leaders? What have you learned?
Well, I've learned so much. I will tell you, one of the things, and I learned from so many mistakes. First of all, I thought I had to do it all perfectly, be always available, particularly if you're running a residential program, like your clients live at the facility.
Right.
So it's like that was their home. Yeah. I think mindset has to shift. You cannot do it all, nor should you think you should do it all. You cannot, and you have to make sure you're able to build teams around you and pour into those people so that it does take some of the weight off of you. But I think making self-care a priority. It is not optional. It's not something you do,
Right.
oh, when I get a vacation or when things get so bad or the crisis hits and, you know, you're forced to. I think you prioritize that. I mean, for me, it was in my calendar. It was non-negotiable.
So
the
it's
same
part
way.
of your, I mean,
It's
it's
part
part
of
of your
your-
routine.
It's part of your routine.
Which
So
has to be.
Look at your work and your lifestyle in terms of how you do the work, and look at that together. Your family stuff should be, you know, prioritized and on your calendar in the same way you would a board meeting.
I think that is the best advice, and because if you don't take control of your calendar,
take control of it.
somebody else will.
Absolutely.
And nobody else can take care of yourself.
No, better than
You.
you can.
That's
And even
right.
if you have an assistant, you make sure that person
Right.
knows. You make sure that person knows.
Rhonda,
Absolutely.
it's been a quick hour.
It has.
This
I feel like
has
we
been
can
an
go
hour.
on already.
Before we go, how can people reach out
Yes.
and find you?
Well, I am the place I'm spending the most time is on LinkedIn. So you
Okay.
look me up at Rhonda Gray on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram of It's Rhonda L. Gray on
Okay.
Instagram. I am on Facebook, Rhonda L. Gray on Facebook. But as I said, Instagram and LinkedIn are my platforms of choice. So
Wonderful.
Well, thank you again for
Yes.
coming on today.
Thank you guys for
What
having
a
me.
It's
This
been
was
so much
wonderful
fun.
I know.
Conversation, and
We need a
you're-
part two. There's so
you
much.
I
got
know. Well,
such
we're
a
gonna come
wealth of
back.
knowledge in the nonprofit sector, and we will have you back.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I'd
Thank you
love
for
to
all
come back.
those nuggets that we gained today.
Yes.
And we will be looking for the lean nonprofit.
The lean nonprofit coming soon. Coming soon.
Okay, you have been watching Voices of Impact with our guest Rhonda Gray. Thank you all, and we will see you next time.
Are you a nonprofit leader awake at night worrying about your organization's future? You're not alone. Did you know a staggering 30% of nonprofits don't survive past 10 years? Often it's a simple reality. No money, no mission.
There is hope. At KBL Impact Partners, we understand the value of every dollar and every donor. Did you know 58% of donors are willing to give more if they know the impact of their donation?
That's why we've created Frame Up for Funding, our exclusive 12-week program designed to empower nonprofit leaders just like you. Learn how you can effectively communicate with donors and funders, demonstrating the lasting impact of their investments.
Visit kblimpactpartners.com today and schedule your complimentary consultation. Together, let's make your mission possible.
Join our Frame Up for Funding program, the 12-week accelerator by KBL Impact Partners. This proven program has helped nonprofits raise millions of new dollars by mastering donor engagement, board development, and funded programs. With only 10 organizations per cohort, you'll get personalized coaching and a clear, achievable funding roadmap to drive success. If you're ready for an explosive 2025, please schedule a meeting with us through our website at kblimpactpartners.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us on today's enlightening episode of Voices of Impact. Remember, each one of you has a power to make a difference in this world.
With the KBL Impact Partners team of over 75 years of experience in the nonprofit and corporate sectors, we are with you on this journey. We stand ready as more than advisors. We are partners and mentors committed to your vision for a better tomorrow. It's about creating solutions that resonate with your unique mission with a dedication to personalized attention that brings out the very best in your organization.
And if you're ready to take your organization to the next level, visit kblimpactpartners.com and schedule your complimentary consultation. Ignite your impact, amplify your vision, and elevate your mission to lead the social movement.
This is Voices of Impact with KBL Impact Partners, where your mission fuels our dedication to social impact. Until next time, let's continue to be the inspiring voice of change in our communities and beyond.